2023 was a really strange year. However, in terms of games, it was honestly pretty cool. Whether we tolerate admitting it or not, life has been different since the beginning of the decade. A lot of the ways we approach activities and other day-to-day activities has been impacted in a way that makes life feel far different than it did in 2019 and before then. But in every year, one thing that's remained constant is that I've been consuming media. At the beginning of 2023, I decided to start doing what some people do on Twitter, and I made a media thread documenting mostly everything new I watched or played in the year. While in the past I've talked in order what the best and worst games I've played in the year are, whether it be in a full-on video or in a casual discussion video, I decided that this time I want to do something a little more normal, a bit more regular. I was sort of inspired by seeing some of my other favorite YouTubers doing it, but I'm going to be talking about my year month by month and discussing each piece of movie or game I witnessed personally in that time frame. While I did script this, it's definitely going to be more casual, kind of like what I did when talking about the best and worst games I played in 2021. But here I'm just kind of talking about the experiences I had this year and not necessarily putting them in order. Admittingly, I didn't have a great start to the year. I had been recovering from a recent spike in anxiety that caused my stomach to have a bad time. Since this, spicy foods have agitated my stomach, so those are kind of off the table for me. But this has been a recovery period for me in a way. And yeah, this was where I upload an update video where I basically stated that uploads will be slow due to my strange condition, which held true because I only really uploaded 2 other videos this year, aside from the one you're watching, which may have been pushed to next year, 2024, we'll have to see. But to sort of get away from all this, I played some games and I watched some movies. So let's get started with all the media I consumed. Banjo-Kazooie is a game I hadn't played before, but I always wanted to finish it. When my stepbrother gave me his Xbox One X for Christmas in 2022, I decided that now was a good time to bite the bullet and buy the Rare Replay collection now that I have an Xbox to call my own. So I played it, and gosh, it ages surprisingly well. It's a really fun and charming collectathon, and I see why it garnered the classic status it's gotten over the years. I immediately became a fan of the game after I finished it, and I went on to do some other playthroughs of it too. For other things I got for Christmas, a friend of mine gave me Freedom Planet 2, and it's honestly fantastic. I followed the game for a very long time after its announcement, and I'd say it was worth the wait. It definitely stands up there with some of the best 2D Sonic games, and it has a great level of polish that newer Sonic games just don't really have, so I think it's a win in my book. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is a movie that I never expected to be as good as it is, but it was just such a charming and beautiful movie that it makes me hope that they make more films like this. It's amazing, and it honestly deserved far better than what it initially got at the box office. My 4th semester at college had gone into full throttle mode. I started to become quite busy, but I did play a number of games this month. I decided to stream Super Kiwi 64 since I had also gotten that as a gift. Basically, it's similar to the Tori games that were like $1 each on Steam and the Switch and are really well done for $1 games, but this one had more of a Banjo-Kazooie approach to it, and it was pretty fun, but I definitely think I enjoyed the Tori games a bit more. I do think it's worth checking out as part of the Tori series, but I like Tori more because those are more focused platformers with tighter level design, and they generally have more replayability. And I am glad that we are getting another Tori game, so I'm excited to see that. Keeping with the N64 spectrum, I went right into Banjo-Tooie, and I honestly didn't like it that much. It was definitely cool to have it be a much larger scale than the original game, but there's just so much shit that happens in the first 30 minutes to where it completely overwhelmed me. And the worlds are generally just too massive and spacious for me to appreciate them on a fun factor like I did with Banjo-Kazooie's much more tight and compact levels. I admire its ambition, and the game made me laugh my ass off a lot of the time. The humor is stupidly on point in this one, but I really just didn't vibe with it. I do think it's impressive for an N64 game, but that's all I can really call it personally. It's kind of strange for me to put this in here, but JoJo Part 6 wrapped up, and while I liked it more than others, it's easily one of the weakest parts of the series. I only really enjoyed the beginning of it, and I enjoyed the insane finale, so it was okay, but I definitely think the previous JoJo parts were better. Hollow Knight was a game that I tried back when it got really popular, but I didn't get a desire to finish it until I decided to force myself to finish it by streaming the game from start to finish. And when I fully immersed myself in it, my gosh, that game made me feel every emotion possible during my playthrough of it. The game is an absolute roller coaster of great challenge, amazing music, terrifying areas, and truly emotional moments. Like, the game actually got me choked up at one point, and I can easily call it one of the best indie games ever made, honestly. Out of the 20 Kirby games in existence, I didn't expect Return to Dreamland to get a remake so soon. Well, I guess it has been over 10 years, but Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe exceeded my expectations. I became a little more underwhelmed as the months went by before it released, but it really turned out to be great. It kind of filled that hollow 2D hole I felt after being a little burned by Kirby Star Allies, since it ended up adding a lot more new stuff like a post-game story mode on top of Kirby's Return to Dreamland already being one of the best Kirby games. HAL is one of those Nintendo devs that hardly ever fails, and when they do, they get right back up on their feet, so I'm excited to see what comes next for the Kirby franchise, honestly. By now, I've really become very busy at college. I took big parts in some news shows there, and for one of my classes, I pre-produced a film, which was pretty exciting. As of writing this, I still haven't seen what that film turned out to be, so guess I'll have to wait and see. But I played 2 key games this month. When I first heard of Pizza Tower, I had no idea what it even was, or if it was even a game that released, but when I saw gameplay of it, I knew that I wanted it, and it did not disappoint. I honestly think it might be my 4th best game of the year. It just has this style and addicting gameplay that I can't get enough of. I think it surpasses Wario Land, which is what the series was inspired by, so I'm super happy for the devs of this one. This is a massive win for them. The murder of Sonic the Hedgehog was not a game I was expecting, but it was a very pleasant surprise, and it's one of the best April Fool's things I've ever seen. Which isn't a high bar, to be fair, since April Fool's is such a cruel holiday. But this is how you do an April Fool's joke, honestly. It's really just a fun labor of love that the Sonic social media team put together. And while it isn't an amazing visual novel, it's still an incredibly nice treat for a free game. April was sort of a month where I caught up on some other things, but I mainly watched a lot of shows and movies this month. I played Kirby's Dream Buffet for the first time, which is a very fun little game. Its online multiplayer base kinda tanked, but it is super fun with friends, and I'd highly recommend it. Pretty sad I slept on it for a year. Of course, I went and saw the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and it is the movie of all time. I did enjoy it due to the great animation and incredible animated adaptation of Mario's world, but I don't think it's a good movie at all. It has far too basic of a story to where it really isn't that investing. So if anything, it's kind of more just appealing eye candy to me. The Owl House concluded, and I loved it. I don't watch TV shows very often, but I heard a lot of people talking about this show in the 2020s, and I immediately got invested in it. It can be chalked up to standard Disney affair if you look at it from afar, but I especially really liked the LGBTQ representation in this show, and it was really, really charming. I liked it a lot. After The Owl House, I was bombarded with recommendations to watch Amphibia. So I did, and I also really liked it. I don't think I liked it as much as The Owl House, but I think the highs of it are quite higher, and yeah, the ending made me freaking weep. Like the hardest I think I cried all year. So it takes quite a bit for me to cry while watching something nowadays, so props to the show for that. After binging Amphibia, I felt an extreme desire to watch a bunch of people's retrospectives on the show. And so while I listened to a bunch of people talking about it, I decided to clear Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart from my backlog. I think it definitely has the highest budget I have ever seen in a platformer, and I found the game quite fun a lot of the time, but I think that despite liking it, I don't think I'm really much of a fan of the series. Platforming it had to offer, but I think I got tired of the combat sequences after hours of playing. Not that it's bad, but I just don't think it's really for me. After this game's non-stop back-to-back combat sections, I think it might be a little much for me. I don't know if I'm going to play the next Ratchet & Clank game. May was supposed to be the last semester of college, but after finding out that I wasn't able to get the certificates I wanted, I decided that this wouldn't be my last semester. That being said, May was dedicated to one thing that dominated the entire month: The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. I streamed the game from start to finish, and when I first played it, I was blown away. I thought it was incredible. Though, as the weeks went on, my sort of honeymoon phase with the game did start to dwindle a bit, and I sort of have a weird stance on it now, even though I do still think it's a good game. I'm not particularly a fan of how much content this game recycles, and even though it mostly reuses it well, it often doesn't feel like a new game to me. But that being said, while the lows of this game are quite tedious and boring in my opinion, the highs of it are the highest I've seen in the entire franchise. I won't get into spoilers, but there are just so many moments that just completely blew me away with this game. The final battle in particular was absolutely phenomenal. Damn near choked me up. It's fantastic. I'd say this is probably my third best game of the year. It's really solid, but I still don't like that it's $70. No matter how you slice it, $70 for a Switch game that runs at 30 frames per second, has lots of frame rate drops, and often runs below 1080p is just really outdated nowadays. I can't really defend it. May was also the month that I made the Crash Team Rumble video, which I was really nervous about making because I was afraid that when the game came out, a lot of my points would become dated. But surprisingly, now the game has come out, I think a lot of my thoughts in that video still kind of hold true, even though I haven't bought the game and played it. I did get a lot of things wrong that would happen, when the game came out, but surprisingly, I think the points I got across in that video kinda still apply, which I don't want to say is a good thing for the game, because, I was sort of rooting for it, in a way, because I did think it was fun, and I hoped that it wouldn't do a bunch of these unfortunate things. But after seeing the game come out, it does seem like it's kinda everything I said that it was in the video. Though I did mention in the video that I was nervous for the entire Crash franchise, and I was worried that the Crash franchise wouldn't continue anymore. And thankfully, I think there was confirmation that there will be more Crash games after Crash Team Rumble. So thankfully, that part of the video is wrong. But a lot of the other stuff I said in that video still kind of apply to my thoughts now, so I'm actually pretty happy with that video for the most part. After this, I would then take a class over the summer where I helped work on a summer short film. However, despite it being very fun at first, that fun wouldn't exactly last for long. So I caught strep throat right in the beginning of June, and I was very sick, which made it very hard to enjoy working on the film despite the class being very fun. After we finished filming this film, I then had a surgery that did not allow me to sit down for a little over a month. I was able to lie down on my sides, but it was an exhausting process. Despite that though, I did play a few games. I tried out and finished Sonic 2 on the Master System, and it sucked. Like, full stop. The game was honestly quite bad. It's super obtuse and cryptic, and it's just not a good game, especially compared to Sonic 1 on the Master System. I had Sonic Advance for a while in my GBA collection, but I never actually bothered to finish it until right before my surgery. And it is quite a fun 2D Sonic game. I think that the majority of the classic Sonic games are better, but this is still a solid GBA game. When I started to recover from my surgery, I decided to play the Pikmin games I missed out on via the newly released Switch versions. Starting with Pikmin 1, which was quite a lot of fun, and I can see the replayability aspect of it. I will say that I find it quite hard to control after being used to the controls of Pikmin 3. But I still see myself doing lots of runs of it in the future. It's a very replayable game. As we carry into July, I am still recovering heavily from this surgery. At this point, I found it quite difficult to play games at all, really. So there's only really one game that I played in the beginning of July before I fully recovered. Pikmin 2. This game is extremely complicated, frustrating, and I'm honestly not a big fan of it. I wanted to like it much more than I did, especially since it almost had a roguelike aspect to it, but this game was really just a slog to get through, honestly, and maybe that's in part due to the recovery process I was going through, but I don't know, I didn't hate it or anything, but it rubbed me the wrong way towards the end with its frustrating challenges. I honestly don't like it very much. I think it's easily the weakest Pikmin game. When I recovered, I finally went and finished Sonic. When I first played it, I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was an extremely frustrating experience that I thought I would never play again. But when I went back to it, something about it just kind of hooked me in a way to where I had this weird desire to master it. I was a huge fan of the trick system it introduced, and it was so fast that it became addicting to try to speedrun. I eventually ended up 100%ing and getting all of the Chaos Emeralds as every character for some sick sense of bragging rights. I guess it grew on me quite a bit, so I guess I do like it in some capacity. Then I played Sonic Advance 3, and while a casual run of the game was quite fun, I did get annoyed trying to get all the Chaos Emeralds. It's nowhere near as tedious to 100% as Sonic Advance 2, but I did get frustrated having to clear some levels again just to get another chance at a really hard special stage. Then the amount of crushing blocks in the game is just really absurd. I think I still like it more than Advance 2, but not by much. And then, when it came out, I gave the Ruin DLC and Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach a go. Security Breach, honestly, is a game that I think is quite bad. It's ambitious with a lot of its ideas, but even putting aside that the game is an absolute buggy mess, it feels like a really poorly designed Metroid Prime game in a way, which sounds weird on paper for what kind of game it is, but just hear me out. It's hard to call it an open world game because the whole game takes place in a giant interior and it doesn't offer a lot of freedom, but it is exploration based, and I think it does a poor job at being an exploration based horror game. However, Ruin is a lot more focused and linear as an experience, and as a result of that, I think it is significantly better than the base game. It still isn't very scary, but I did have fun with it, and nothing really broke my game experience, which is a lot more than I can say about the base game, so good job. It's pretty good for a free expansion. So I finished this game in August, but I might as well put it in the July bit since it came out in July, but Pikmin 4 was pretty fantastic. They refined the controls of Pikmin to perfection. It feels amazing to play, and the game is very charming through to the end. It takes a lot of aspects of 2 that I really didn't like and somehow makes them so much more bearable. And I even enjoy most of the callbacks that it had to Pikmin 2. The game is absolutely massive, and because of how well made it is, I think it might actually be my second best game of the year. I could only really complain that I maybe thought it dragged a little bit, but maybe I just wanted to finish it quickly so I could watch all my favorite channels talk about it, and the fact that I was still recovering from my surgery a little bit, it probably tied into that a little bit. Still, it's a fantastic game despite all of that. August was definitely more of a catch-up month for me on stuff that I missed out on. The semester began, so I became awfully busy, but I did play a game and I watched a movie. I decided to knock Super Monkey Ball Jr. off of my backlog since I've played pretty much every game in the franchise except for this one. So while I thought it was a neat little novelty, it's also an incredibly frustrating game since you have to work with the controls that aren't exactly friendly for Monkey Ball, despite them trying very hard to make it work. If you only have a GBA, I can see you getting some enjoyment out of it, but it's only really a cool novelty to me. And then I heard insane reviews for the Barbie movie, and I heard absolutely nothing about the movie until people started raving about it online, so I felt like I needed to see what all the fuss was about. And going in, I thought it was going to be a funny rom-com film that had Barbie's name on it. And after watching it, I think it's the best movie I saw all year, honestly. Like, not only was it quite a funny movie that I enjoy rewatching, but it is surprisingly emotional too, in ways that I didn't expect. I like this movie a lot, and I have a huge amount of respect for what it did. I didn't really play any new or old full releases in September, just games that I was already familiar with, and I had fun with those. I did make the Sonic Roboblast 2 kart video, which I had a lot of fun doing. I think my thoughts on the game have kind of shifted a little bit since that video, but I do stand by most of what I said in that video, and it was a lot of fun to work on. Throughout the whole month, though, I was waiting for one thing to come out. Sonic Frontiers: The Final Horizon. I have a lot to say about this, so I may as well group all the other updates that came out of the game with this and discuss those as well. Sonic Frontiers is a game I like quite a lot. I don't think it's peak or a great game, but I also don't think it's anywhere close to bad. There's simply too much I like about it for me to group it in with the bad Sonic games. Update 1 was a pretty cool quality of life update that improved a number of things that were jank about the base game, like not being able to upgrade all your stats at once and being given the option to turn off things like the annoying Starfall slot machine or the Power Boost cutscene that plays every time you collect max rings. The rewards for beating the new challenges in the update are kinda neat, but spoiler alert, Extreme Mode sucks, and I do not think it was play-tested. Like, it's not a good no-hit run mode in my opinion. Like, I do not think the Titan fights were designed with no-hit runs in mind, especially Giganto, or Giganto, however you pronounce it. Update 2 was probably the update that changed Frontiers completely by introducing the Spin Dash, the Open Zone challenges, and a bunch of new platforming challenges in the Open Zone that far exceeded the quality of the base game's platforming level design. But then, I honestly don't think the Final Horizon update is very good. At the time it came out, I honestly think it lessened my opinion of Frontiers as a whole. I like a lot of aspects of it. Like, I think Amy is a fun character to play as, and cheesing the entire game as Tails is fun in its own way by flying around and stuff, but playing as Knuckles just kinda sucks. He's not fun to play as at all, and his controls are really clunky. I still think that Sonic is by far the best character to play as, and even in his segment, stuff like the Cocoa Trials on top of all the towers are all just horrible. They're these really bad combat challenges that has some of the worst use of artificial difficulty increase I've seen in a hot minute by speeding up all the enemies and restricting all combat moves for one of the trials. And of course, the Master Coco trial, where you have to fight every Titan with less than 400 rings with a parry window that only lasts a few frames, just sealed the update's fate in my eyes. The new final boss is pretty hype, but it's a very flawed boss fight that just feels a little cryptic in how you're supposed to beat it, not to mention the fact that the trees get in the way. I just realized that I'm talking NSA about this update. What I'm trying to say is I still like Sonic Frontiers, but I have very mixed feelings on the final update for the game, despite previous updates making the game significantly better. October was the month for video games. A ton of big releases came out this month, and I did not play all of them, but there's still a lot to talk about here. To start with a game that came out a few years ago, Inscryption is a game I hadn't even heard about until I watched my friend play a little bit of it. And after seeing some of the weirder aspects to it that almost dives into horror territory, I had to try it for myself, and I honestly think it's one of the weirdest and coolest games I've played in a minute. Not only is it an addictive card game with RPG and roguelike mechanics, but throwing this weird ARG element to it completely hooked me and made me want to see the game through to the end. I can't wait to see what Pony Island 2 has in store, which is the next game they're developing, but we're probably going to have to wait a while for that. After hearing about the new Scott Pilgrim anime that was going to release on Netflix, and thinking it looked quite good, I decided to finally cave in and watch Scott Pilgrim vs. the World with a friend. And honestly, I loved it. I think it's one of the craziest films I think I've ever seen. I never thought I would like it since the concept of it seemed incredibly, stupid. But after watching the movie, I like how it fully embraced its absurdity and didn't back down to any of the crazy ideas that were directed. I think it may be one of my new favorites, honestly. Sonic Superstars. This one's okay. Out of all the Sonic things releasing this year, I didn't think that Superstars would probably be the weakest of the things coming out. And while I do like it more than the Plus DLC for Sonic Origins and the Final Horizons DLC for Sonic Frontiers, it's really a shame that the game wasn't amazing. I still think it's pretty good, but it should not have released in the state it was released in. My first co-op playthrough was a disaster, and we ran into so many bugs and glitches. But at the same time, it was a disaster in probably the best way, since the co-op was handled in such an awful way that it was fun bickering with my friend as we constantly did stupid shit in the game. And I mean, she and I came out in the end thinking it was a fun game ultimately, which it is. It's 2D Sonic. I like 2D Sonic. You'll probably enjoy it if you like 2D Sonic. But it's not amazing or anywhere close to the likes of Sonic Mania, or even Sonic 2. Trip is an S-tier character though. She is the MVP of the entire game. Super Mario Bros. Wonder came and took my throne for Game of the Year. I enjoyed this game so much that it's honestly on the highest shelf of Mario games for me, right up there with the kings like Mario Galaxy and Mario Odyssey. This is everything I've ever wanted in a 2D Mario game, and I loved every second of playing it. In a weird way, it almost feels like the Sonic Mania of 2D Mario, which is a very cliche term to use nowadays for 2D platformer revivals, but despite heading in territories that 2D Mario has never ventured into before, there are also so many little throwbacks to other Mario games that just charmed me in the best possible way. I love this game. It's without a doubt one of the best Mario games in the franchise. I didn't play Spider-Man 2 this year, but I sure as shit watched the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and yeah, it kinda sucked. As a horror film, I think it completely fails since I was never scared at any point. And it just does things that just utterly baffled me, like including a fort building montage with the animatronics, which just ruined any chance of me calling the movie good, since it ruins any kind of tension that the animatronics had as being antagonists. However, as a fan of the series, I still did enjoy it because I think the set for the movie had a lot of love put into it, and the animatronics themselves look incredible. Like, I really hope they open some kind of real-life Freddy Fazbear's Pizza attraction somewhere and use the animatronics for this movie in them. They are that well realized. And I did get giddy when certain story moments from the games happened in film form. I enjoyed watching it, but you are not going to see me calling it a good movie. But I was happy to see it doing so well financially, since it is a big deal to see an indie horror game that was made with the budget of a cup of instant noodles turn into this giant blockbuster film, and have it be mostly faithful in terms of looks. Finals approach for college, and at this point I'm dedicating most of my time to college work and hanging out with my college friends. However, when it came out though, I played WarioWare Move It, which, as a WarioWare game, is always good fun. I do think it's incredibly lacking in single-player content for the price, but it is a very fun multiplayer game, and I was pretty happy with it. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is a pretty cool little short anime. It wasn't really what was advertised to be at all, and I won't spoil why, but what it did turn out to be was something I did like. I still like the movie much more, but in the end, I am glad they did what they did with this anime to make it stand out from the usual Scott Pilgrim adaptation, since we've seen the story realized in so many different formats over the years. This year, my college friends kinda got me into Mortal Kombat, since we would play it a lot when we would go over to each other's houses, so I decided to play Mortal Kombat 1 to see if I could get good at it in any kind of way. So, while I still kinda suck at the game, I did enjoy playing the campaign of this one, and it is a fun fighting game, one that I like significantly more out of the traditional fighting game franchises out there. What I don't like is how they integrated microtransactions into the game and made it very live service-y, especially when the game already costs $70. They even charge for fatality animations, which is just cruel. It's a fun game for sure, but the unnecessary monetization of it just sucks. Like, no, get out of here, stop. I finished this one in December, but I'll include it here. Super Mario RPG, the remake specifically, was quite good. I see why people like it, but I don't think it's really anywhere near my favorite Mario RPGs. It kind of stands somewhere below my top 5 Mario RPGs. It is a really good game, and I liked it quite a lot, but I don't think it's aged as gracefully as the other Mario RPGs I love so much. After Mario RPG, though, the end of the year would end up being very hard. At the end of November, my grandfather passed away. It was very sudden for us since he had just gotten out of the hospital, but he ended up falling over and hitting his head. December is a month that we dedicated to celebrating the good life that he had, and I went and graduated college after attending the funeral, which I know that he's very happy for me for doing. So, before moving on, I just wanted to dedicate this section here to say to my grandfather, thank you for everything, and thank you for cheering for our family on for so many years and many more years to come. And not a whole lot of games came out this month, but I did decide to wrap up some stuff I was playing, and I tried out a few multiplayer games. Sonic Dream Team is a game that genuinely makes me mad. I think it's a really fun and well-made 3D Sonic game that, in a way, surpasses the quality of the recent Sonic Frontiers, but what makes me so mad about it is that it's exclusive to Apple Arcade, which is a service that is only on a select few devices and a service that does not allow you to own any of the games that are on it. I really hope this gets ported to another console someday because it is a really solid game with a lot of effort put into it from the mobile Sonic team. But I guess they needed Apple to fund this one, so I guess we won't be seeing it on PC or consoles anytime soon. It's a real shame because it's a really good game. Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2 was a game that I was very worried about. I love the first Help Wanted game since I think it adapts the series into VR very well, but the most recent entry, Security Breach, which was made by the same studio as this game, was released in an incredibly unfinished state. Well, I'm happy to say that Help Wanted 2 ended up exceeding my expectations. It's a really solid entry-level VR horror game. I don't find it scary at all since I think modern Five Nights at Freddy's just doesn't hit the same that it did back with the Scott Cawthon developed games. But this game is simply fun, and I think that is what carries it for me. I do think that the first Help Wanted might be better though, since it left such an impact seeing the Five Nights at Freddy's series not only be in VR, but also play in full 3D for the very first time. And seeing the familiar offices and locales in VR and 3D just hit in a way that kind of makes Help Wanted 2 have a little less of an impact since we've seen all of the characters this game has to offer in 3D before. I think it's great at what it does, but since Help Wanted 1 has more of what I like in Five Nights at Freddy's in it, I think I ultimately prefer that one a little more. But still, Help Wanted 2 is a solid VR game, and I really liked it. So, fun fact, I used to mostly play Geometry Dash on YouTube before I changed the style of my content completely into more focused edited videos talking about games that I like. Geometry Dash 2.2 feels like a completely different game from any of the other Geometry Dash updates, and I think it turns Geometry Dash into one of the best level editing games on the market, honestly. It's fantastic, and I can't wait for the update that includes the demon level that they were working on. Initially, that was meant to be in the update when it was released, but the update makes the game so much more interesting now, and it's a great excuse to go back to the game. So I actually got an Xbox Series S recently to sort of make my Game Pass machine. I really like the thing so far, and when I had my college friends over, I decided to play Gang Beasts on Game Pass since I figured it'd be a silly little multiplayer game. And it was. It's not really anything more than what it sets out to be. It's just a funny 3D ragdoll fight game where you throw people into bottomless pits in very silly ways, and it's good fun. I like it quite a lot. We had a good ol' hoot while playing it, especially. When browsing VR games on the Steam sale, I found Devigo on the list, which caught me off guard because I really had been following the game for a while, and the game wasn't even on sale, but I tried it out through the free Night Pass, which lets PC players play the game for free against other VR players who have paid for the game, and then I bought the full game when it wasn't even on sale. And I think it's a really fun game to play with your friends, and it's really cool being this giant boss character in VR while standard PC players try to defeat an opponent that has basically limitless possibilities for attacks and stuff. I can't wait to see where this game goes, since it is still in early access, and a lot more is coming to it in the future. Then, to round up everything, I figured I'd put Lethal Company here, since it's definitely the online multiplayer game I think I played the most this year. None of the Five Nights at Freddy's content scared me that much this year, so it was weird to see that Lethal Company is not only very comedic, but it's also one of the most intense horror games I think I've played in a long time. You truly don't know what will happen around every corner in this game, and I think it's really good at what it does, and I can't wait to see how it progresses as the game develops, since, like Devigo, it's also in early access. But I think it's really good. It honestly doesn't even feel like it's in early access. It's really well done. I like it a ton, and I can't wait to play more of it. So that's everything that I played that I hadn't experienced up until now. This was certainly a weird year for sure, and it's pretty standard because the 2020s have been such a strange year for all of us, because we've had to adapt to a lot of different things that have changed over the course of the past, few years. But hopefully 2024 is a solid year, and I don't know what videos I have planned that I want to make for next year, but I do have a project that's in the works that hopefully I will be able to share with you all, and I'm quite excited about it. But whatever it is, can't wait to document all the stuff I play in 2024, so thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful 2024.